In the heart of Constantinople, long before the domes gleamed with golden mosaics and the sea walls glistened at dawn, the hum of life began in narrow streets shaded by tall stone buildings. The Byzantines called them insulae, apartment blocks, though the word carries little of the cramped, shadowed weight these structures bore. Imagine a world where the scent of oil lamps never fades, where the echo of footsteps in a corridor tells you more about your neighbors than their names. You wake up before the first bell of Hagia Sophia. The sky outside your tiny window is still violet, streaked faintly with the orange of another coastal sunrise. The air feels heavy, not with warmth, but with the damp breath of stone. Inside, the walls sweat when the sea mist creeps in. They hold stories of coughs, laughter, arguments, the scratching of quills. Your bed is a thin mattress stuffed with straw, wrapped in linen that smells faintly of olive oil and dust. Someone upstairs moves a chair. It creaks like a breaking branch. Another neighbor stirs coals in his brazier, and the scent of smoke seeps through the cracks in the plaster. You are not alone. You never are, not here. The Byzantine apartment block was a monument to ingenuity, but also to endurance. Built for the swelling populations of the empire's capital, these structures were packed close together, 3, sometimes 4 stories high. The wealthy rarely lived here. Their villas spread out toward the palaces near the sea. Here, in the maze of the city's heart, lived artisans, clerks, widows, porters, and soldiers retired from distant campaigns. Each family occupied a room or 2. Privacy was an illusion. A curtain was a wall. A whisper could be a conversation. The corridor was everyone's domain. Sometimes even the stairwell doubled as storage. Baskets of olives, a broken amphora, or a sleeping cat that had adopted everyone and no one. When you descended the stairs, uneven, chipped by years of footsteps, you passed doors carved with crosses or scraps of painted icons. The Byzantines feared fire more than famine, for wood was scarce and flames spread quickly through close quarters. Many kept a jar of water near the entrance, a small insurance against disaster. Still, most fires were stopped not by buckets, but by prayers. Downstairs the street awaited. Not the grand avenues that led to the hippodrome, but narrow lanes where rain turned dust into dark sludge. The city was a living organism, constantly breathing, groaning, feeding on itself. Children played with sticks and pebbles. Women traded gossip and garlic, and the cries of hawkers echoed between the walls. The soundscape of a Byzantine street was unrelenting. The clang of blacksmiths, the bleating of goats, the rolling of wooden wheels on cobblestones, and the distant, mournful chanting of a nearby chapel. Each sound merged into the next, a kind of low, eternal hum that wrapped around the senses like a rough blanket. Back in your apartment, daily life revolved around small rituals of survival. You fetched water from the nearest cistern, sometimes several flights down. It was often lukewarm and tasted faintly of algae. You stored it in amphorae that leaned against the wall, their mouths sealed with wax or cloth. Food was simple: bread, lentils, salted fish, onions, and if fortune smiled, a drizzle of honey. Cooking was done in small braziers, fueled by charcoal or scraps of wood scavenged from the street. The smell of cooking was both comforting and suffocating. It lingered in your clothes, in your hair, in the fabric of your curtain walls. And above it all, the oil lamp burned, its flame small and steady, its smoke curling like a soft memory against the ceiling. In this world, noise and smell were constants, but light was a luxury. Windows were small and covered with oiled parchment instead of glass. The sun reached your room for perhaps an hour a day, and even then it was filtered, golden, and pale. Most of the time you lived in a half-light, the kind that makes time feel slower, heavier, as if every day lasted a little longer than it should. You didn't choose your neighbors. The city chose them for you. On one floor lived a widow who embroidered for a living, her eyes weary, but her hands still steady. Next door, a young couple argued often, their voices muffled by the thin wall, but not enough to hide the frustration of poverty. A floor above, a retired soldier polished his armor, though he would never wear it again, just as a habit, a ritual of who he once was. The apartment block was a society in miniature. People borrowed salt and oil, shared gossip, and fought over noise or spilled chamber pots. Sometimes disputes were settled in the local baths, where tempers cooled as easily as bodies. And yet, despite the closeness, there was a kind of quiet dignity in the way they endured it all, a belief that every hardship was a form of divine testing. Religion filled every space the empire built, even these humble walls. Icons hung in corners blackened by smoke. Small shrines with flickering candles stood beside beds. Before leaving the room, you might cross yourself and murmur a quick prayer, not only for protection, but to remember that your suffering, however small, mirrored the greater struggle of all humanity. The nights were the hardest. The sea breeze brought cold and damp, and rats scurried between the cracks in the floorboards. From distant towers, the bells of monasteries rang for vespers, marking the passage of time that few could afford to measure otherwise. The city quieted, but never truly slept. A cough, a creak, the whisper of sandals on the stairs. Life in the Byzantine block was a constant reminder that solitude was a dream for the rich. In the upper floors, the danger was always structural. The wood beams groaned, plaster crumbled, and rain found its way through every weakness. When storms swept in from the Bosporus, walls shivered as though the entire building prayed to survive another season. Downstairs, it was the opposite. Too close to the damp ground, too close to the seeping rot of refuse and runoff. Each level had its own misery. Still, there were moments of quiet grace. Morning light spilling through a narrow window, catching the dust as it drifted like slow snow. The smell of bread baking somewhere below, and the laughter of a child echoing up the stairwell. Those moments were small, fragile, but they kept people alive, in spirit if not in comfort. In a city that called itself the center of the world, most lived in corners. The empire's glory, its gold, its mosaics, its theology, rarely touched those who lived stacked upon one another like books in a damp library. Yet in their small rooms people sang. They whispered stories of saints and sailors, of emperors and miracles, of a life that might someday be better. It wasn't grandeur that defined Byzantine life. It was endurance. And if you had stood there, in that dim corridor of stone and smoke, you would have heard it, not silence, but the quiet rhythm of persistence. The soft, endless heartbeat of a civilization that survived, not because of its palaces, but because of its people, who woke every day, breathed the damp air, lit their oil lamps, and carried on. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the domes of Constantinople turned from gold to shadow, another city awakened, quieter, slower, but no less alive. The night markets were not the grand bazaars of daytime commerce, where silk traders and jewel merchants called out their prices in booming voices. No, these were smaller, secretive gatherings, corners of life where lamps glowed like fireflies, and the scent of salt and spice filled the damp evening air. The sea always came first. It breathed into the city through its harbors, the Golden Horn, the Bosporus, the Sea of Marmara. Even from the heart of the city, you could smell it. That sharp tang of salt and tar, of drying nets and fresh fish laid out on woven mats. The night carried that scent through the alleys, mingling it with smoke from braziers and the sweetness of figs simmering in honey. You walk slowly down a narrow lane, lit by small clay lamps hanging from ropes. The light trembles in the wind, throwing golden ripples over wet stones. Every few steps, someone murmurs an offer, a loaf of bread still warm, a handful of olives, a cup of diluted wine. No one shouts here. The night market moves by whisper, by the quiet shuffle of feet and the low rustle of cloth. Merchants here are different from the ones in the daylight world. By day, they sell grain, oil, and tools. By night, they sell what can't be sold openly. Rare spices from the east, small relics smuggled from monasteries, herbs that promise healing or love. There are charms made of bone, little icons painted by hands too humble to sign their work. Bits of mosaic glass stolen from forgotten ruins. The air feels thicker here. Every smell tells a story. Roasted chestnuts, fish grilling on flat stones, incense burned by a monk who has long since left his vows behind. The markets of the night are a map of human need, hunger, faith, fear, and desire, all blending under the same soft sky. You stop by a woman's stall. She sells candles made from beeswax and tallow, each one shaped a little differently, some wrapped with small bits of string. She doesn't speak. She nods, gestures to a small flame flickering beside her. You realize these are not ordinary candles. Each has been blessed, or so she claims, by the shadow of a saint. The faithful buy them, not for light, but for comfort, for the feeling that in the darkness, something sacred still listens. Across the narrow street, a young man sells ink and parchment, things precious to those who write. He dips a reed into a jar and writes your name on a scrap in curling letters, Greek, elegant, deliberate. The ink glistens for a moment before sinking into the fiber. He smiles faintly and tells you that every word written at night carries twice the truth, because the dark does not lie. You move on. The city stretches around you like a vast, sleeping animal. Somewhere nearby, a drunk soldier laughs too loud. From an upper window, a child's lullaby drifts into the air, mixing with the clatter of a pot being washed. There's always sound, even at night, but never silence. Just softer layers of life, the distant bark of a dog, the murmur of a prayer, the whisper of waves. The Byzantine night was not just darkness. It was a world of shifting shadows. Lamps flickered like eyes, alleys curved like secrets. The empire that built cathedrals of light also knew the power of the unseen. People believe that the night belonged to both angels and demons. You could walk through the same market twice, once in safety, once under unseen eyes, and never know which was which. In the quieter corners, beggars gathered near the public fountains. They dipped rags into the water, drank slowly, spoke softly to one another. Nearby, a man with a lyre played a simple tune, his fingers slow but sure. The melody carried through the market, weaving between the smells and murmurs like a thread of smoke. Music in the night didn't aim to entertain. It was there to remind people they were still alive. You pause by a stall where a fisherman sells what is left of the day's catch. The fish glimmer faintly under the lamp, their scales catching the light like silver coins. He tells you he comes here every night, because by morning the fish lose their beauty. Their shimmer fades, their eyes dull. At night, he says, they still remember the sea. You realize he could be speaking of himself too. The sea, always close, hums in the distance. From the port, you hear the low creak of moored ships, the slap of waves against wood. The harbors never sleep. Sailors from distant lands arrive under cover of night, bringing with them new words, new smells, new dangers. Some carry silk wrapped tight against their skin. Others carry stories of storms, of saints, of cities where the moon looks different. The Byzantines listened. They were a people of crossroads, forever between worlds. Somewhere near the harbor walls, an old man sells oil lamps, each one different, shaped from clay, carved with crosses or ships. He tells you that a lamp's flame remembers its owner. The more it burns, the more it learns. When the flame dies, it takes a piece of you with it. You smile politely, but the thought stays with you. Every household in the city depends on oil and flame, and every light casts a shadow. The Byzantines lived with both, in faith and fear. Deeper into the market, you find a small food stall. A woman ladles lentil stew into clay bowls, her hands steady, her eyes half closed with weariness. The smell is earthy, comforting, lentils, garlic, onion, a trace of cumin. You eat slowly, sitting on a low stool. Around you, strangers share space without words. For a few minutes, there's peace, a kind of quiet unity born from exhaustion. The night market feeds more than hunger. It feeds the need to belong. Above the rooftops, the moon climbs higher. Its pale light mixes with the golden flicker of lamps, creating a world both real and unreal. The streets shimmer faintly, like old mosaics underwater. In the distance, the great dome of Hagia Sophia glows softly, a shadow against the stars. Its bells have long since fallen silent, but its presence fills the air, a reminder that even in the dark, the empire's heart still beats. You wander toward the edge of the market, where the smells of spice and smoke thin into the scent of seaweed and salt. The air cools. The city fades behind you. In front, the black water stretches endlessly, broken only by the glimmer of ships' lanterns. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, is another world. Persia, Arabia, the Holy Land, but for most here, this narrow coast is all they will ever know. You sit on a low wall, listening. The city breathes. Behind you, faint laughter. Ahead, the rhythmic sigh of the sea. The Byzantines understood something modern life often forgets, that beauty and hardship, noise and silence, sacred and profane, they all coexist. The night market was proof of that balance, chaos and calm held together by faith and habit. A cat brushes against your leg, its fur rough from the streets. Somewhere a lamp flickers out. Another one is lit, and just like that, the city keeps its quiet rhythm. The night doesn't end in Constantinople, it simply fades into dawn. And as the first light seeps into the alleys, merchants pack their goods, sweep the stones, and whisper a short prayer. For another night, may the sea be kind, the fire quiet, and the city awake again. At first glance, the life of a Byzantine clerk might have seemed easy. No swords to polish, no heavy armor to wear, no blistering sun in the fields, just parchment, ink, and words. But in the quiet heart of the empire, behind high stone walls and the golden shimmer of imperial mosaics, this life was its own kind of prison, built not of chains, but of obligation and dust. It begins early, long before dawn. In a narrow house near the old Forum of Constantine, a man rises. His hands ache from yesterday's writing. The muscles between his thumb and wrist are knotted tight, as if he's been holding his pen even in his sleep. He lights a small oil lamp, its flame weak but steady, and boils water for a cup of barley tea. It tastes faintly of earth and metal, but it wakes him. His name might be Nicetas, or Michael, or Iones, names as common in Constantinople as pigeons on the roofs. He wears a simple tunic of faded linen, once white, now gray. Over it he drapes a short wool cloak, the kind that marks him as neither poor nor rich, invisible, like most who keep the empire running. When he steps into the street, the city is still half asleep. The sky is the color of old parchment, pale and waiting. Somewhere in the distance, bells ring from a monastery, their sound swallowed by fog. He walks to the secretum, the imperial chancellery, where the empire's pulse beats in wax seals and ribbons. The building itself smells of old wood and lamp oil. Inside, a few clerks have already arrived, their silhouettes bent over desks. You can hear the faint scratch of styluses against wax tablets, the soft clink of ink jars, and the slow shuffle of sandals on stone. This is the Byzantine bureaucracy, the true engine of the empire. 1,000 years of rule carved into parchment and papyrus. Every tax, every decree, every imperial marriage and excommunication, all written, copied, sealed, and stored in endless rows of wooden shelves. Nicetas sits at his desk. It's small and scarred, the surface littered with crumbs of wax and flakes of ink. His first task of the day is simple: copy a decree from the Emperor's Council regarding the grain supply from Egypt. The document must be perfect, every letter measured, every accent placed. A single mistake could mean not only embarrassment, but suspicion. Was it a slip of the hand or a deliberate alteration? He dips his quill, made from a goose feather, into ink as black as midnight oil. The ink is a mix of soot, gum, and vinegar. It smells faintly sour, and it stains his fingers permanently. He begins to write. Greek letters curve across the page, disciplined and beautiful. His wrist moves with precision, almost ritualistic. He inspects the documents, occasionally stopping to correct a misplaced accent or a smudge of ink. His silence is heavier than scolding. By mid-morning, the light filters in through narrow windows, streaking the air with dust. The smell of parchment grows thick, animal skin, lime, and oil. It's strange to think that every sheet they write on was once alive. Calf skin, goat skin, sometimes even sheep. The Byzantines called it vellum when it was fine, membrana when it was rough. Either way, it was the empire's most valuable surface, more precious than marble, in a way, because ideas outlast stone. Nicetas pauses to stretch. His back cracks, his eyes burn. He rubs his temples, leaving faint gray smudges of ink. Outside, a faint hum of the city has begun. hawkers shouting, carts creaking, the low song of water carriers. But inside the office, time doesn't flow. It drips, slow, steady, inevitable. At noon, a bell rings for the midday rest. The clerks gather in the courtyard, eating bread and cheese under a vine-covered pergola. Conversation is minimal. Voices are low, polite, always cautious. Everyone here knows that words once spoken can be copied, twisted, or used. In Byzantium, even speech has a shadow. Nicetas chews slowly, looking up at the mosaic above the doorway. It shows the emperor handing a scroll to Christ himself, a declaration that divine authority flows both ways. He wonders if that's really true. To him, the scroll represents something else, how even sacred power depends on ink and handwriting. The empire lives on paper, and men like him are its veins. After lunch, he returns to his desk. A messenger has arrived from the palace, carrying a sealed scroll marked with crimson ribbon. Everyone straightens. The seal bears the image of a double-headed eagle, imperial correspondence. Nicetas is chosen to copy it. He bows slightly and receives the document with both hands. He breaks the seal carefully. Inside, the parchment is smooth, the handwriting elegant, likely from a higher scribe. The message concerns a bishop's dispute in Antioch, full of formal phrases and veiled threats. Nicetas copies it word for word, his eyes tracing every curve. The letters shimmer faintly under the lamplight, alive in their precision. By the time he finishes, the light outside has turned amber. Clerks are leaving, rubbing their wrists, stretching their necks. Some exchange brief smiles. Others walk silently, already thinking about the next day's tasks. Nicetas stays a bit longer, finishing a margin note. He prefers to end the day with balance, the last line aligned, the ink dry. When he finally steps outside, the sun has set. The street lamps are lit, flickering like stars trapped in clay. He walks home slowly, his fingers still stained, his mind heavy but calm. There is a strange peace in this repetition, this endless copying of words he didn't write and decisions he didn't make. In a city full of ambition and intrigue, he is almost invisible. That invisibility is a kind of freedom. At home, his wife and children are asleep. He sits by the window, listening to the sea's distant murmur. He takes out a scrap of old parchment, not imperial, not official. On it he writes a few lines of his own. Nothing political, nothing dangerous, just a thought he had during the day. Ink remembers what men forget. It doesn't age, it doesn't hunger, it only waits. But it can never forgive. He folds the scrap carefully and hides it in a small wooden box under his desk. Tomorrow he'll return to the same room, the same desk, the same ink. The empire will continue, scroll after scroll, decree after decree, and his words, quiet, private, unseen, will sleep inside the box like a secret. Pause, long and soft. There were thousands like him, men whose names were never carved on marble, but whose handwriting shaped the fate of emperors and exiles. They didn't fight in wars, but they fought the slow erosion of memory. Every stroke of ink, every seal pressed into wax, was a small act of preservation, a promise that Byzantium, however fragile, would be remembered. And maybe, in the end, that's the truest kind of immortality. Not the kind carved into statues or sung by poets, but the kind written in ink, waiting patiently for someone centuries later to read it aloud again. Imagine for a moment that you live in the crowded heart of Constantinople, sometime around the 10th century. The streets are narrow, the air thick with smells of olive oil, dust, and distant sea salt. The walls of the city rise above you, great marble bones that have stood for centuries. And in the midst of it all, there's a small stone building, unassuming from the outside but sacred in its own quiet way, a public bathhouse. The Byzantines called it a Balanion, a place for washing, yes, but also for talking, resting, and remembering what it felt like to be alive. For most people, it was the closest thing to peace they could afford. You push open the heavy wooden door, and at once, a wave of warm, damp air greets you. It smells of steam, olive soap, and faint herbs, maybe bay leaves or rosemary. Your skin prickles from the sudden change in temperature. The sound inside is soft but layered. The steady drip of water, the low hum of voices echoing against marble, and somewhere a small metallic ring, a servant striking a copper bowl to signal the next group S turn. Light filters through high, round windows, broken by steam, so that everything seems to move in slow, shimmering waves. You can't quite tell where the marble ends and the mist begins. You undress in the apoditerion, the changing room. Your clothes, simple linen, perhaps patched from use, are folded and placed in a small basket. The attendant, an older man with careful eyes, takes your sandals and nods toward the inner chambers. You step barefoot onto the stone floor. It's warm beneath your feet, heated from below by a system the Romans left behind, the hypocaust, a clever design of brick pillars and hot air channels that turn the floor itself into a gentle hearth. As you walk, the warmth seeps slowly into your legs, your chest, your hands, a softness that seems to melt the stiffness of the outside world. The first room is lukewarm, the tepidarium. Here, people gather to adjust to the heat, to sit on marble benches and talk in quiet voices. A merchant is speaking with a sailor about grain prices. A widow murmurs to a friend about her son's apprenticeship. Two students debate a theological question, each trying not to raise his voice too much, out of respect for the echoing calm. This room is where gossip begins, softly, carefully, like smoke curling from a wick. You sit for a while. The air smells faintly of soap and wet marble. Your heartbeat slows. You can almost feel the city's noise fade behind the thick walls. A servant brings a small bowl of warm water and a rough linen cloth. You wipe your arms, your face. The water feels alive. In Byzantium, bathing was not just about cleanliness, it was about balance, a kind of bodily prayer. From there, you move deeper into the cauldron, the hot room. The steam hits you like a living thing. It's thick and heavy, clinging to your eyelashes, curling into your hair. Your breath becomes part of it, slow, visible, dissolving. A few men sit near the wall, eyes closed, sweat gleaming on their foreheads. A woman nearby, for the baths were sometimes shared or alternated by hours, massages her arms with oil, her face peaceful and almost timeless in the shifting mist. The attendant, bare-chested and silent, approaches with a strigil, a curved bronze scraper. He pours warm water over your shoulders, then gently scrapes your skin. It's not painful, more like shedding the outer layer of the day. The sound it makes is quiet and rhythmic, like the brushing of parchment. Your muscles loosen. The ache in your back from work or worry melts away under the heat. You can almost imagine the emperor himself feeling this same sensation, centuries before or after. because in Byzantium, the bath was one of the few experiences shared across all classes, from the poorest sailor to the richest noble. Everyone, at least for an hour, was just a body in steam. The conversation in the room drifts like fog. You hear words about politics, but soft. Rumors of a new tax, whispers of the empress's jewels, the color of the latest imperial cloak. But there's also laughter, quiet, knowing laughter. A joke about a bishop who slipped on marble, about a noble who pretended to faint to avoid paying his fee. The Byzantines loved irony. Even here, surrounded by heat and ritual, their wit was as dry as the air outside. A young boy, an apprentice perhaps, pours cold water into a stone basin, watching it hiss as it meets the heat. The scent rises, sharp, clean, almost metallic. He looks tired but content. His hands are raw from the soap, but his eyes are calm. Even he knows this is one of the better places to work in the city, not outside under the sun, not in the dust of a warehouse. Here, at least, there's warmth and laughter. Eventually you move into the frigidarium, the cold room. The shock is immediate. The water bites at your skin, your breath catches. It feels like waking from a dream. The Byzantines believed that cold water sealed the body's balance, kept the humor steady and the soul alert. Some prayed silently while immersed, thanking God for the contrast between warmth and chill, between luxury and endurance. You step out, shivering but alive. Your heart feels lighter somehow, as if the heat had burned away more than just sweat, maybe fear or fatigue or something nameless that comes from living too long in a crowded world. You wrap yourself in a soft cloth and sit by a marble column. A thin shaft of light pierces the mist, illuminating the water droplets on your skin. For a moment, everything is still, just the sound of dripping water, like a clock that forgot to rush. Outside, Constantinople continues to roar. Merchants, bells, prayers, the clatter of sandals on stone. But inside this bath, time feels suspended, dissolved in the air. People talk about small things, bread prices, neighbors, ships. But under the steam, those words are lighter, harmless. Dawn in Constantinople comes slowly. It doesn't blaze. It seeps. The first light glides over the domes, slides down the mosaics, touches the rooftops where the gulls perch. You can almost hear the city inhale, a long, slow breath before the day begins its steady hum. From the window of your small apartment, you see the haze of early morning smoke rising from clay chimneys. It smells faintly of charcoal and bread. Somewhere below, a boy shouts, calling out to sell sesame cakes still warm from the oven. The sound is distant, softened by the fog, but it carries that ancient rhythm, the pulse of trade, the music of a city alive. Today is market day. Not that there's ever a day without trade in Byzantium, but today the Makros and Bolos, the great street of the city, will fill to the edges. The stone-paved road will vanish under carpets, baskets, tables, cages, and shouting. And for a few hours, Constantinople will become the center of the world again, a place where every cent, color, and coin tells the story of 1,000 miles. You wrap your simple cloak tighter around your shoulders and step outside. The air is cool and damp. Your sandals click softly on the uneven stones. Already the streets are stirring, the first merchants pulling their mules, the first voices testing their prices. A woman passes carrying amphorae on her shoulders, filled with wine from the Thracian hills. Two men argue quietly about the size of a fish, their hands gesturing more than their words. You walk toward the heart of it, the Forum of Constantine, where the emperor's column rises like a finger pointing into the sky. The closer you get, the louder the sound becomes. Not just loud layered. The city doesn't shout all at once. It murmurs, laughs, clangs, and breathes in different tones. There's the deep rumble of ox carts, the ringing call of vendors, the rhythmic beating of copper pans. And above it all, the soft chant of distant prayers drifting from a nearby chapel, as if holiness itself were trying to balance out the noise of profit. The first scent that reaches you is spice. It hits you like a memory, sharp, warm, and ancient. Cinnamon from India, pepper from the Malabar coast, frankincense from Arabia, each one worth more than silver, carried on ships that have seen storms and pirates and the long patience of the sea. At one stall, a merchant lifts a small wooden box and opens it with ceremony. Inside, tiny curls of dark bark glisten like treasure. He looks at you knowingly. Ceylon, he says softly, as though the name itself were a spell. You smile, but you can't afford it. Still, you breathe in deeply, because even smelling such a thing feels like a luxury. Nearby, a Persian trader with bright green eyes sells dyed cloth, reds that look like fire, blues that shimmer like the Bosphorus at noon. He smiles as he haggles, his words quick and fluid, his laughter soft. The woman buying the cloth touches it gently, almost reverently. In a world where most people wear earth tones, a piece of silk is like holding sunlight in your hands. You move deeper into the market. Now the smell of spices gives way to something more human. Bread, sweat, goats, fish, figs. It's overwhelming, but not unpleasant. The marketplace in Byzantium was a living thing. It coughed, it sighed, it laughed. Each sound, each smell, a heartbeat in the empire's chest. A man selling olives calls out praises of his village in the Peloponnese. Another sells dates from Syria, letting you taste one for free. It's soft, warm from the sun, and sweeter than honey. You close your eyes as you chew. For a second, you're not in the city anymore, but far away in a grove where wind hums through palm leaves. At another stand, a woman sells icons painted on small panels. The gold leaf catches the morning light and glows faintly, as if lit from within. You can tell she's been here for years. Her fingers are stained with pigment, her eyes calm, her smile kind. She greets you not like a customer, but like a familiar face. That's how it is in the Byzantine markets. Trade isn't only about goods. It's about rhythm, memory, recognition. A kind of daily ritual where buying becomes a conversation with life itself. Beyond her stall, you hear a louder crowd, the livestock traders. Goats bleat, chickens flutter, pigs squeal. Men shout and argue with the authority of generals. A boy tries to keep his animals from escaping into the crowd. The smell here is rough, heavy, real. But it is also the smell of survival, the smell that keeps families fed and bellies full. And then there's the fish market. Close to the harbor, the air turns cool and salty. Fishermen unload their catches. Gleaming scales, silver tails, buckets dripping. Sea bass, mackerel, anchovies, the city's favorite. They toss fish from hand to hand like coins, laughing, cursing, singing sometimes. One of them hums a tune about the sea, low and haunting, the kind that clings to you like mist. Somewhere nearby, under a stone archway, you hear another sound. The ringing of a hammer. A blacksmith is working a piece of metal, shaping a knife or maybe a horseshoe. The sparks jump like fireflies in the dim air. He doesn't stop when people talk to him. He's part of the rhythm, part of the pulse of trade. His work is song, his hammer the drum. Across the way, in the shadow of the arch, a scribe sits with parchment and reed pen, offering to write letters for those who cannot. A young woman dictates a message to her husband at sea. Her voice is steady, but her eyes shimmer. The scribe's pen moves gently, slow, careful, like prayer. Even this is commerce in Byzantium, the trade of words, of memory, of longing. You pause for a moment in the middle of the street. The crowd moves around you like a river. The sun has climbed now, and light spills between the awnings, catching on brass and fabric and hair. It's a golden, humming chaos, yet there's a strange peace in it, too. No one really rushes. Everyone has their own rhythm, their own circle of conversation, their own dance in this endless marketplace. In a corner, an old musician plays a lyre, softly. His fingers tremble, but the melody is graceful, almost invisible, weaving through the noise like a thread of silk. Some children stop to listen, swaying gently. A few adults glance his way and leave a coin on the ground. He doesn't look up. He keeps playing, eyes half closed, as if he's hearing another world layered under this one. At midday, the noise reaches its peak. The sun blows through the thin awnings, painting everything in gold and dust. The heat rises from the stones. The air tastes like metal and fruit. Someone laughs loudly nearby, a deep, genuine laugh, and others join in. For a moment, the market feels like a living cathedral, built not of stone, but of sound and scent and human breath. And yet, hidden beneath all this liveliness, there's also exhaustion. Many of these people will sell all day and still barely make enough for bread. The merchant with the cinnamon hasn't seen his family in months. The fisherman's hands are cracked and bleeding from salt. The scribe's eyes ache from candlelight. The marketplace, for all its beauty, is also a place of endurance, a theater where survival wears a smile. As the afternoon wanes, the sounds soften. Stalls begin to close. Voices fade to murmurs. The shadows grow longer, and the smell of cooking fills the air again. Garlic, oil, lentils. People carry home what they bought. Bread tucked under arms, baskets of fruit, small pieces of joy. You walk slowly back through the streets, now quieter, the stones still warm from the sun. A breeze drifts from the sea, carrying a trace of salt and spice. Somewhere the bells of Hagia Sophia begin to ring, low, patient, eternal. You stop for a moment to look at the market from afar. Even half empty, it still seems alive, as if the day's noise lingers in the air like a ghost. And you think to yourself, this is Byzantium, not just emperors and mosaics, but ordinary life, traded in small moments. A handful of figs, a scrap of cloth, a kind word across a counter. It's here, in the dust and light, that the empire breathes most deeply. Tomorrow morning, it will all begin again. The same shouts, the same smells, the same small hopes wrapped in linen and laughter. The market never truly ends. It only sleeps, waiting for dawn to wake it again. And as the city fades into the hush of evening, you can almost hear it still. The soft echo of trade, the whisper of coins, the murmur of human need, and the endless rhythm of a civilization buying and selling its way through time. There are few places more revealing of a civilization's soul than its kitchen. Not its palaces or temples, not its armies or arenas, but the small, smoky room where a family gathers to prepare food. In Byzantium, the kitchen was rarely glamorous. It was dark, built of stone or clay, with a low ceiling that trapped the smoke and the smell of centuries. And yet, within that humble space, the heartbeat of the empire pulsed quietly, the rhythm of pots and knives, of oil and grain, of bread being broken and shared. You wake before dawn, the same as every day. The air inside your apartment is cool, heavy with the faint scent of yesterday's meal, garlic, lentils, the ghost of olive oil. You move slowly, careful not to wake the others. Your family sleeps in the adjoining room, behind a thin curtain. The only light comes from the faint blue glow of dawn, seeping through a narrow window. You cross the small space to the hearth, the heart of the Byzantine kitchen. It's nothing more than a clay pit blackened by years of fire. The ashes from the previous night's embers still lie there, faintly warm to the touch. You gather a few dried reeds and splinters, whispering a short prayer before striking the spark. The flame catches. It flickers weakly at first, then begins to dance, casting soft orange light over the uneven walls. The kitchen breathes again. There's something sacred about this moment, not in the grand ecclesiastical sense, but in the quiet rhythm of necessity. Every household in Constantinople begins its day this way: a spark, a flame, a whisper of warmth pushing back the darkness. You take a jar of water and pour it into an old clay pot. The sound echoes softly in the still room. From a small wooden shelf, you reach for a handful of barley, coarser than wheat, but cheaper. Most families cannot afford the white bread that the nobles and monks enjoy. Still, barley fills the stomach, and when mixed with oil and herbs, it becomes something close to comfort. You stir the mixture slowly, listening to the bubbling. Cooking in Byzantium is not rushed. Time here stretches like the long arc of the empire itself, patient, deliberate, ancient. The walls of the kitchen are stained from smoke and oil. In the corner, bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling: thyme, sage, bay leaves. Each one carries its own scent, faint but persistent. There's a small amphora of olive oil, precious and carefully guarded. Beside it, a jar of honey, thick and golden, harvested from the hills beyond the city. You dip your finger into the honey, just a taste. It's sweet, but not just sweet. It's alive, earthy, carrying the scent of wildflowers and heat. In a city that often smells of stone and sea, honey is like a memory of sunlight. As the fire grows stronger, you prepare the bread, the most sacred food of all. Even the poorest family in Byzantium begins the day with bread. It's more than nourishment. It's a symbol of unity, of survival, of God's grace. Bread is mentioned in prayers, offered in churches, carried on journeys. It connects emperor and beggar alike. You take a small bowl of leaven, the sour-smelling remnant from yesterday's dough. It's your inheritance, passed from generation to generation, kept alive like a member of the family. You mix it with flour and warm water, then knead it slowly, pressing the dough with the rhythm of your breath. The sound of it, soft, wet, patient, fills the air. For a few moments, there's no empire, no city, no history. There's only you, the dough, and the hum of the fire. As the bread bakes, you prepare the rest of the meal. A small bowl of lentils, soaked overnight, simmering now with onions and a little salt. If you're lucky, there's a piece of salted fish left from the previous market day. You cut it into small pieces and drop it into the pot. The smell rises, sharp, salty, alive. It fills the room like incense. You slice a clove of garlic, crush it with the side of your knife and toss it in. Your hands move without thought. You've done this thousands of times. Cooking is not a recipe. It's memory. Every gesture, every pinch of salt carries the echo of your mother's hands and hers before that. In this way, Byzantium's kitchens are not just rooms. They are living archives, preserving centuries of taste and tenderness. As the food simmers, you take a moment to sit by the window. Outside, you can hear the city stirring, the clang of iron, the call of merchants, the distant murmur of the sea. The smell of smoke from other kitchens drifts through the air. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine all the households cooking together, their fires joining into one vast invisible glow beneath the skyline of domes and minarets. You think of the emperor, perhaps eating now in his marble palace, served by dozens of hands, his food gilded, spiced, extravagant. And yet, at the heart of it, it's the same as yours: bread, oil, salt, and hope. Rich or poor, noble or peasant, all of Byzantium meets at the table. By mid-morning, your family begins to wake. The room fills with quiet movement, the shuffling of feet, the rustle of fabric, the low hum of greetings. The children stretch and yawn, their hair tangled from sleep. You ladle out the stew into small bowls, careful to divide it evenly. Each person receives a crust of bread and a drizzle of oil, not much, but enough. As they eat, the room fills with the soft sound of spoons against clay, of satisfied sighs, of ordinary peace. For a brief moment, everything feels timeless. You could be in the 10th century or the 12th or the 15th, it wouldn't matter. The act of sharing food has barely changed. It's older than the empire, older than language itself. Later in the day, you prepare for the evening meal, which is often simpler but slower, more communal. Neighbors may drop by, stories will be told. Wine will be poured, not much, just enough to soften the edges of the day. Sometimes a lute is played. Sometimes someone sings a hymn softly under their breath. The line between sacred and ordinary blurs in a Byzantine kitchen. Every meal is a small liturgy of gratitude. On feast days, when the church allows meat or dairy, the atmosphere changes. The scent of roasting lamb or baking cheese fills the alleyways. Children laugh louder. Women bake extra loaves to share with neighbors, and the streets seem lighter, almost festive. But even on those days, the center of it all remains the same: bread and oil, the two pillars of Byzantine life. And yet, beneath the warmth, there's always a shadow. Oil is expensive. Flour prices rise with the river's mood. A poor harvest in Anatolia means lean months in the city. Sometimes the loaves are smaller. Sometimes you eat more onions and fewer lentils. Sometimes, when there's nothing left, you boil water with herbs and call it soup. Still, the fire burns, the bread is broken, the ritual endures. That's what survival looks like in Byzantium. Quiet resilience, baked fresh each morning. As evening falls, you light a small oil lamp. The flame is steady, golden, patient. You clean the table, wash the bowls, sweep the ashes from the hearth. The kitchen settles into silence again, as if sighing. Outside, the city glows faintly, the great domes of Hagia Sophia shimmering under the moonlight. You sit near the dying fire, feeling its warmth on your hands. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings, marking the hour for prayer. You whisper a simple blessing, the same your mother whispered. Lord, give us our daily bread, and keep the flame alive tomorrow. And as the last spark fades, you know that in this small kitchen, in this forgotten apartment block, the soul of Byzantium has been fed, quietly, humbly, completely. When the sun rises over Constantinople, it does more than cast light over the marble roofs and crowded markets. It awakens something deeper, a rhythm of faith that hums quietly beneath the surface of the empire. In Byzantium, faith is not a matter of belief alone. It is the pulse of the city, the invisible thread that holds together every brick, every breath, every bowl of bread broken at the table. The Byzantine world breathes religion, not only in its grand cathedrals and golden icons, but in the smallest gestures of daily life. A sign of the cross before lighting the oven, a whispered prayer before leaving home, a glance toward heaven when thunder shakes the sea. Faith is not separate from life. It is life. You wake at dawn, as you always do, to the sound of distant bells. They echo across the city, soft, rolling, almost mournful, calling monks and merchants alike to prayer. You sit up slowly, the air cool against your skin. Your room smells faintly of wax and smoke. A small lamp flickers near an icon on the wall. The Virgin's face, serene and watchful, painted in gold leaf and ochre. You whisper a short prayer before standing. It's automatic, almost instinctive. The same words your mother spoke, the same words her grandmother whispered when the empire itself was younger. Lord, bless this day. Let me work with clean hands. Let me walk in peace. You cross the room and look out the narrow window. The city is waking. In the streets below, you see women carrying water jugs, men guiding donkeys loaded with bread, children chasing one another between shadows. Above them all, the dome of Hagia Sophia glows faintly in the dawn, enormous, eternal, as if floating on air. Even from this distance, you can almost hear the low, resonant hum of morning prayer. It's said that in the great church, light itself worships God. When the sun hits the mosaics just right, the saints seem to shimmer, and the air fills with gold. For a moment, you can believe that heaven and earth are only a breath apart. In Byzantium, faith isn't confined to church walls. It flows through the markets, the workshops, the kitchens. Every object, every sound carries a trace of devotion. The fishmonger calls out, "For the love of Saint Nicholas." The baker stamps a cross on each loaf before sliding it into the oven. Even the merchant weighing his coins might whisper, "God sees," half as a prayer, half as a warning to himself. It's not superstition. It's survival, a way of keeping balance in a world that often feels uncertain, fragile, unpredictable. The empire has known earthquakes, fires, invasions, plagues. It has risen and fallen and risen again. And through it all, the people have clung to one thing that never burns, never crumbles: their faith. A Byzantine home, no matter how poor, always keeps an icon corner, a small shrine facing east. There you'll find the Virgin, the Savior, perhaps a local saint or martyr. A lamp burns before them, fueled by olive oil. The light flickers softly, like a heartbeat. At night it becomes the soul of the household, small, steady, eternal. Every visitor bows before it. Every child learns to cross themselves before bed. And when storms shake the city, when the streets flood or the walls tremble, families gather near the icons, whispering prayers together, trusting that these painted faces will not abandon them. Faith also shapes the rhythm of time itself. In Byzantium, the year is not marked by seasons alone, but by feasts and fasts. There are weeks when the city smells of roasted meat and honey cakes: Easter, Christmas, the feast of St. George. And then there are long stretches of fasting when the markets sell little more than beans, bread, and olives. To live in Byzantium is to move between feast and restraint, celebration and silence. Each fast is a reminder that life, like the empire, depends on discipline and patience. Each feast a reminder that joy too is holy. Even the poorest beggar on Easter morning will find a way to light a candle, to share bread and wine, to feel, if only for a moment, part of something vast and eternal. The monks of the empire live this rhythm more intensely than anyone else. Far from the city, in the rocky wilderness of Mount Athos or the silent monasteries of Cappadocia, they rise long before dawn. Their lives are ruled by bells, by prayer, by labor. They eat little, speak less, and spend their days copying holy texts by hand. One letter at a time, their eyes weary, but steady. To the world, they may seem removed, detached, but to Byzantium they are the silent lungs through which the empire breathes. Their prayers, it is said, rise like incense for the salvation of all, emperor and peasant alike. Back in the city, religion is everywhere. You pass a market stall and the merchant greets you with Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. You nod and reply the same. You hear it whispered by beggars, shouted by sailors, sung by monks. It's the phrase that binds the city together, a cry, a song, a heartbeat. Even the waves of the Bosphorus seem to echo it, endless and soft. At midday the bells ring again. You stop your work not to rest, but to breathe and cross yourself. The act takes only a moment, but it resets the world, a quiet acknowledgement that you are small, that life is vast, and that time belongs to something greater than the empire itself. Inside the churches, light and shadow perform a constant dance. The smell of incense is thick, almost liquid. It seeps into your hair, your clothes, your memory. You step into the great church and your breath catches. The dome soars above you, impossibly high, the gold mosaics alive with reflected light. The choir begins to sing, low, slow, endless. No instruments, only voices rising and falling in waves. It's not a song meant to entertain. It's a sound meant to dissolve you, to remind you that you're dust, and yet divine dust. You stand there, unmoving. You don't speak. You simply listen. For a moment, the city, the empire, even the world seem far away. There's only light, sound, and silence, woven together like a prayer. Faith shapes not only how the Byzantines pray, but how they see the world. Illness is not merely physical. It's a trial of the soul. A good harvest is not luck. It's grace. A sudden storm is not chance. It's warning or mercy, depending on who you ask. The invisible and visible overlap constantly, like two layers of glass pressed together. When a child is born, the family rushes to baptize them, to bring them under the protection of Christ before misfortune can strike. When someone dies, candles burn through the night, prayers whispered for the soul's safe passage. Even in death, faith remains the thread that ties the living to the dead, the earth to heaven. Of course, faith in Byzantium is not without tension. The empire has seen debates that shake it to its core, arguments about icons, about the nature of Christ, about who truly speaks for God. During the iconoclast period, when images were banned, soldiers marched through the city, tearing down sacred paintings. Families hid their icons under floorboards, risking their lives to protect them. To them, these images weren't art. They were presence, love made visible. When the ban finally ended, the joy was immense. People filled the streets with candles, singing hymns, lifting their icons high. It was not just the restoration of art, it was the return of light. In the evenings, after work, the city quiets. The bells call again. Families gather by the lamplight, the scent of oil and smoke in the air. You light your small lamp before the Virgin's face, and the flame trembles, golden and alive. You sit for a moment in silence. The day's noise fades, the shouts of merchants, the clatter of hooves, the endless hum of the city. Now there's only stillness, the sound of your own breath, the faint crackle of the lamp. You whisper your last prayer of the day. Keep watch over the city, over our children, over those who sail the dark sea. Let the light not go out. In that small moment you feel what every Byzantine feels, that faith is not distant, not abstract. It is near. It's the warmth of the lamp, the smell of wax, the taste of bread blessed by hands that tremble slightly. It's in the rhythm of breath and the beating of hearts. It's the empire's quiet strength, not in its armies or gold, but in its prayers whispered behind closed doors. And as the lamp burns low and sleep comes, the flame continues to glow, small, patient, eternal. It flickers in thousands of rooms across the city, in palaces and huts alike, each one a fragment of light, together forming the soul of Byzantium, a faith that endures, not in triumph, but in tenderness. When the sun sinks into the Marmara Sea, Constantinople changes its face. By day, it is a city of noise and gold, markets clattering, bells ringing, merchants shouting. By night, it becomes something else entirely, quieter, slower, softer, but also stranger. The empire does not sleep. It only exhales. You step into the street just as the last light fades from the sky. The air smells of salt and smoke, of oil lamps being lit, of bread cooling on stone ovens. The sky is deep blue now, the kind that turns almost black before the stars dare to appear. From the harbor, the wind carries the sound of water against the hulls of ships, a rhythm as old as the city itself. And above it all, faint, distant, the echo of the evening bells from Hagia Sophia, spreading across the hills like a prayer made of sound. You begin to walk downhill toward the Golden Horn. The stones under your sandals are uneven and slick, polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. Each one holds a memory, the tread of soldiers, merchants, slaves, saints. The city's history is under your feet, layered like old paint. Some say that at night, when the moon is right, you can hear the city whispering through the stones. Old voices, lost promises, the heartbeat of an empire that refuses to sleep. Shadows gather in doorways, under arches, behind the wooden stalls of closed markets. But there is no silence here, not truly. You hear the soft whine of a donkey tethered near a bakery, the splash of oars from unseen boats. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else a woman sings, low and sweet, a lullaby carried on the wind. The streets of Constantinople at night are alive not with chaos, but with the quiet persistence of survival. You pass the remnants of the day, a broken pot in the gutter, a loaf of bread left too long in the sun, the faint smell of spices from a closed shop. The city exhales its heat slowly, like a living creature cooling after labor. From open windows, candlelight flickers, painting yellow squares on the walls of narrow alleys. You glimpse faces, tired, thoughtful, pale in the glow. Someone yawns, someone prays. Someone whispers a story to a child about angels who guard the night. Every house has its own rhythm, every window its own small world. And above them all, the stars finally appear, distant, cold, and strangely reassuring. You turn a corner and come upon the Forum of Constantine, vast and almost empty now. By day, it's filled with traders and soldiers, beggars and nobles. But at night, it feels like a ruin, a memory of power wrapped in silence. The great column in the center rises like a ghost, its bronze statue of the emperor gleaming faintly under moonlight. Pigeons sleep in its cracks. The wind hums softly through its base, a hollow song that never ends. Nearby, a few torches burn by the steps of a tavern. Laughter leaks out through the door, rough and tired. Sailors, guards, men too restless to sleep. They drink, tell stories, forget the cold. Their words are thick with salt and wine. You hear fragments. The sea was black that night. Then the storm came. By the grace of St. Nicholas we survived. And then laughter again, the kind that hides more fear than joy. You keep walking, past the tavern, past the market square, toward the sea walls. Here the air grows colder. The sound of the water is louder now, crashing softly against the stones below. You stop for a moment and look out beyond the wall. In the dark distance, faint lights shimmer on the opposite shore, the Asian side of the empire. You think of how close and how far it feels at once. A single city divided by a stretch of water, two continents breathing together in the night. You hear footsteps behind you. Two figures pass, night watchmen, the nyctophilics. They carry lanterns and wooden clappers, knocking them rhythmically as they walk. The sound is sharp, familiar. Toke, toke, toke. A warning to thieves, a comfort to the sleepless. They nod to you as they pass, faces half hidden under hoods. Peace to you, one murmurs. And to you, you reply. Their lanterns swing like tiny stars until they vanish into the dark. It's strange how such a small sound, that wooden clack, can make the city feel safe. Or maybe it's just the illusion of safety, but illusion is enough for tonight. Near the docks, the air grows damp and heavy. You smell fish, tar, and brine. Boats rock gently against the piers, their ropes creaking like old bones. A cat slinks between barrels. Somewhere nearby, a sailor hums to himself a slow song in a language you don't recognize. The melody rises and falls like the tide. You pause to listen. There's a sadness in it, a longing for home, for calm seas, for something lost. You realize that in this city, everyone longs for something. Safety, love, forgiveness, sleep. You climb the hill again, toward the heart of the city. Your steps echo in the emptiness. The streets twist like veins, narrow, uncertain, alive. At every corner, the light changes. Gold, then gray, then blue. Sometimes the moon disappears behind a cloud, and the world turns to ink. You walk by touch, by memory, trusting your feet to know the way. And then, as you pass a small chapel, you hear singing. Soft, unaccompanied, pure. You stop and listen. Inside, a few monks chant the night office, Compline. Their voices blend like waves, low and constant. It's not for an audience. It's simply what they do every night, whether the city listens or not. You stand outside, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over you. It feels like standing in the shadow of eternity. When the chanting ends, silence returns. A silence so deep it almost hums. you realize how rarely the city is truly quiet. Even now, in this stillness, you hear life, faint, fragile, but there, a door closing somewhere far away, a dog barking once, the slow, patient murmur of the Bosphorus, the whisper of wind against stone. And for a moment you understand why the Byzantines called their city the Queen of Cities, not because of her power or her wealth, but because she never truly sleeps. Her heart beats day and night, with prayer and noise, with laughter and loss. She is alive, endlessly, restlessly alive. You reach home just before dawn. The sky is turning pale again, streaked with silver. Somewhere a rooster crows. The bells will soon begin to ring, the first call to prayer, the first stirrings of another day. You light your small oil lamp, watching the flame bloom. The icon on your wall glows faintly in the dim light. The city outside still hums even as it rests. You whisper a quiet thought before lying down. May the night remember us kindly. May the day not find us too weary. The lamp flickers once, twice, then steadies. And beyond your window, Constantinople exhales again, one long, endless breath between faith and fatigue. When people think of Byzantium, they imagine churches, emperors, and mosaics, golden, shimmering, eternal. But beneath all that splendor ran the pulse of something far more human, far more fragile: trade. The empire did not survive on prayers alone. It lived on ships and markets, on contracts and caravans, on men and women who rose before dawn to weigh olive oil and count coins. Commerce, that was Byzantium's silent heartbeat. Not glorious, not heroic, but constant. And without it, the empire's cathedrals would have been empty, its armies unpaid, its people hungry. Tonight, let's walk through that world, not as scholars but as travelers. Let's listen to the city's hum, its soft exchange of gold for grain, silk for silver, salt for survival. The morning begins in the mazy, Constantinople's great avenue, the spine of the city. By sunrise, it's already alive. Merchants open their shutters with creaking sounds dusting off their counters. The air smells of baked bread, tanned leather, dried figs, and sweat. You can hear the low murmur of bargaining, calm, steady like waves. Coins clink, feet shuffle. Voices rise and fall in Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Latin, a symphony of trade. The Byzantines were polyglots, not by curiosity, but by necessity. If you wanted to sell, you needed to understand. You pause at a stall selling spices. Cinnamon, cardamom, pepper. They glitter like treasure in the morning sun. The merchant, his beard oiled and his robes plain but clean, offers you a pinch of something red gold. Saffron, he says. From Cilicia? Better than what they sell at the docks. You nod politely, pretending to consider, though you know you can't afford it. In the empire's markets, conversation itself is an art form. Every gesture, every silence, every shrug is a negotiation. To buy too quickly is to insult the seller. To linger too long is to admit your desire. It's a slow dance, and everyone knows the steps. Further along the avenue, the sound changes. Now you hear hammering, the rhythmic clang of metal workers. They make hinges, coins, chalices. In one small workshop, a money changer sits at his desk, surrounded by tiny scales. He moves with infinite patience, weighing, testing, examining each coin. Gold solidus, silver milioregin, copper phallus, the empire's blood in metallic form. You notice how each coin bears the emperor's face, his profile, calm and eternal, pressed into every transaction, every deal. Even here, in the sweat and noise of trade, the emperor watches. His authority extends through currency, through trust. The Byzantine coin, especially the gold solidus, was famous from Spain to Persia. It did not lose weight. It did not change purity. It was steady, the one coin everyone trusted. And so, long before the word Byzantine became a synonym for complexity, it simply meant reliable. In the shade of a portico, you see a line of men carrying amphorae, oil merchants. Their hands are stained dark with olive residue, their tunics stiff with salt. They come from the countryside, from estates where the trees grow gnarled and old. Each amphora bears a mark, the seal of a landlord, or sometimes of a monastery. The church, too, was a merchant. Saints owned vineyards. Monks sold honey. Holiness in Byzantium was never far from the marketplace. As you watch, a small boy trips under the weight of a jar. Oil spills, glistening on the stones. The merchant sighs, half in anger, half in pity. He knows how much it costs. You can almost feel the sadness of waste, how precious every drop is. This, too, was Byzantium. Beauty mixed with fatigue, devotion balanced with debt. By mid-morning, the docks awaken. You walk down to the harbor of Theodosius, where ships from all corners of the empire gather. The air is alive, gulls cry, sailors shout, ropes snap, water slaps wood. From Egypt come grain ships, heavy and slow. From Trebizond, furs and wax. From Venice, glass and arrogance. From Antioch, silk, light as breath, worth its weight in gold. You watch a shipment being unloaded. Bales of fabric wrapped in oilcloth, guarded by imperial soldiers. A scribe stands nearby, writing on a wax tablet, his stylus scratching softly. Every bolt of silk must be recorded. Every coin must be counted. The empire thrives not on freedom, but on precision. To sell silk without imperial permission was treason. To steal a thread was to risk exile. Silk was power, and power in Byzantium was never cheap. You pause to watch the weavers. In a small workshop near the docks, they sit cross-legged before their looms. Their fingers move in a slow, patient rhythm. Over, under, pull, tighten. The air smells of dye and oil, and the fabric glows in the morning light. Blue like the sea, red like wine, gold like sunlight. Each thread feels like a prayer, quiet, repetitive, full of faith in its own completion. It's easy to romanticize this, but the truth is more human. The work is exhausting. The pay is low. The air is thick with dust and dye fumes. Yet these hands, tired, cracked, anonymous, are what kept the empire glittering. Without them, there would be no court robes, no church banners, no symbols of divine authority. The emperor's majesty depended on the calloused hands of people no one remembered. At midday, the market slows. The sun is high now, and heat shimmers on the stones. Merchants retreat under awnings, sipping watered wine, fanning themselves with bits of parchment. Some close their eyes for a moment, a stolen nap before the next wave of customers. You walk past a group of moneylenders counting coins. Their fingers move faster than your eyes can follow. One man looks up and smiles. Care to invest in pepper? He jokes. You smile back, pretending you have the coins to do so. In Byzantium, even humor had value. Everyone was a negotiator. Even laughter could be an investment. As afternoon fades, the city changes tempo again. Shadows stretch long over the markets. The bells from nearby churches ring softly, marking the hours. You see women buying small jars of perfume, men loading wagons with grain, monks passing silently through the crowd with baskets of bread for the poor. In one corner, a storyteller performs. He stands on a crate, gesturing with his hands, his voice rising and falling like the sea. He tells of Alexander, of the Trojan War, of lost emperors and miracles. Children gather around him, eyes wide. Merchants listen while pretending not to. For a few minutes, everyone forgets their fatigue. Trade pauses for wonder. As the sun sets, the harbor glows gold. Ships drift lazily, their sails catching the last light. The smell of the sea mingles with the smoke of cooking fires. You hear laughter, the distant sound of flutes, the creak of wheels on stone. The day's business is done, but the city is still awake. You think of how this economy works, not through greed alone, but through rhythm, through trust, through routine. Every jar of oil, every coin, every thread of silk, all part of an invisible web holding millions of lives together. Byzantium's greatness wasn't only in its emperors or its armies. It was in its markets, in its ports, in its quiet transactions. It was in the patience of its merchants, the honesty of its scales, the endurance of its workers. It was in the faith that tomorrow someone would still come to buy. Night returns, soft and warm. The lamps of the market glow like stars fallen to earth. The scent of olive oil lingers in the air. Coins jingle faintly as merchants close their boxes, whispering small prayers of thanks. The empire breathes, steady and calm, a heartbeat made of gold, grain, and faith. And as the last shop shutter closes, you realize that the hum of trade, that quiet, endless rhythm, is not so different from the sound of the sea. Eternal, gentle, necessary. When people think of Byzantium, they imagine churches, emperors, and mosaics, golden, shimmering, eternal. But beneath all that splendor ran the pulse of something far more human, far more fragile: trade. The empire did not survive on prayers alone. It lived on ships and markets, on contracts and caravans, on men and women who rose before dawn to weigh olive oil and count coins. Commerce, that was Byzantium's silent heartbeat. Not glorious, not heroic, but constant. And without it, the empire's cathedrals would have been empty, its armies unpaid, its people hungry. Tonight, let's walk through that world, not as scholars but as travelers. Let's listen to the city's hum, its soft exchange of gold for grain, silk for silver, salt for survival. The morning begins in the mazy, Constantinople's great avenue, the spine of the city. By sunrise, it's already alive. Merchants open their shutters with creaking sounds, dusting off their counters. The air smells of baked bread, tanned leather, dried figs, and sweat. You can hear the low murmur of bargaining, calm, steady like waves. Coins clink, feet shuffle. Voices rise and fall in Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Latin, a symphony of trade. The Byzantines were polyglots, not by curiosity, but by necessity. If you wanted to sell, you needed to understand. You pause at a stall selling spices. Cinnamon, cardamom, pepper, they glitter like treasure in the morning sun. The merchant, his beard oiled and his robes plain but clean, offers you a pinch of something red gold. Saffron, he says, from Cilicia, better than what they sell at the docks. You nod politely, pretending to consider, though you know you can't afford it. In the empire's markets, conversation itself is an art form. Every gesture, every silence, every shrug is a negotiation. To buy too quickly is to insult the seller. To linger too long is to admit your desire. It's a slow dance, and everyone knows the steps. Further along the avenue, the sound changes. Now you hear hammering, the rhythmic clang of metalworkers. They make hinges, coins, chalices. In one small workshop, a money changer sits at his desk, surrounded by tiny scales. He moves with infinite patience, weighing, testing, examining each coin. Gold solidus, silver melioration, copper phallus, the empire's blood in metallic form. You notice how each coin bears the emperor's face. His profile, calm and eternal, pressed into every transaction, every deal. Even here, in the sweat and noise of trade, the emperor watches. His authority extends through currency, through trust. The Byzantine coin, especially the gold solidus, was famous from Spain to Persia. It did not lose weight. It did not change purity. It was steady, the one coin everyone trusted. And so, long before the word Byzantine became a synonym for complexity, it simply meant reliable. In the shade of a portico, you see a line of men carrying amphorae. Oil merchants. Their hands are stained dark with olive residue, their tunics stiff with salt. They come from the countryside, from estates where the trees grow gnarled and old. Each amphora bears a mark, the seal of a landlord, or sometimes of a monastery. The church, too, was a merchant. Saints owned vineyards. Monks sold honey. Holiness in Byzantium was never far from the marketplace. As you watch, a small boy trips under the weight of a jar. Oil spills, glistening on the stones. The merchant sighs, half in anger, half in pity. He knows how much it costs. You can almost feel the sadness of waste, how precious every drop is. This, too, was Byzantium. Beauty mixed with fatigue, devotion balanced with debt. By mid-morning, the docks awaken. You walk down to the harbor of Theodosius, where ships from all corners of the empire gather. The air is alive, gulls cry, sailors shout, ropes snap, water slaps wood. From Egypt come grain ships, heavy and slow. From Trebizond, furs and wax. From Venice, glass and arrogance. From Antioch, silk, light as breath, worth its weight in gold. You watch a shipment being unloaded. Bales of fabric wrapped in oilcloth, guarded by imperial soldiers. A scribe stands nearby, writing on a wax tablet, his stylus scratching softly. Every bolt of silk must be recorded. Every coin must be counted. The empire thrives not on freedom, but on precision. To sell silk without imperial permission was treason. To steal a thread was to risk exile. Silk was power, and power in Byzantium was never cheap. You pause to watch the weavers. In a small workshop near the docks, they sit cross-legged before their looms. Their fingers move in a slow, patient rhythm. Over, under, pull, tighten. The air smells of dye and oil, and the fabric glows in the morning light. Blue like the sea, red like wine, gold like sunlight. Each thread feels like a prayer, quiet, repetitive, full of faith in its own completion. It's easy to romanticize this, but the truth is more human. The work is exhausting. The pay is low. The air is thick with dust and dye fumes. Yet these hands, tired, cracked, anonymous, are what kept the empire glittering. Without them, there would be no court robes, No church banners, no symbols of divine authority. The emperor's majesty depended on the calloused hands of people no one remembered. At midday the market slows. The sun is high now, and heat shimmers on the stones. Merchants retreat under awnings, sipping watered wine, fanning themselves with bits of parchment. Some close their eyes for a moment, a stolen nap before the next wave of customers. You walk past a group of moneylenders counting coins. Their fingers move faster than your eyes can follow. One man looks up and smiles. "Care to invest in pepper?" he jokes. You smile back, pretending you have the coins to do so. In Byzantium, even humor had value. Everyone was a negotiator. Even laughter could be an investment. As afternoon fades, the city changes tempo again. Shadows stretch long over the markets. The bells from nearby churches ring softly, marking the hours. You see women buying small jars of perfume, men loading wagons with grain, monks passing silently through the crowd with baskets of bread for the poor. In one corner, a storyteller performs. He stands on a crate, gesturing with his hands, his voice rising and falling like the sea. He tells of Alexander, of the Trojan War, of lost emperors and miracles. Children gather around him, eyes wide. Merchants listen while pretending not to. For a few minutes, everyone forgets their fatigue. Trade pauses for wonder. As the sun sets, the harbor glows gold. Ships drift lazily, their sails catching the last light. The smell of the sea mingles with the smoke of cooking fires. You hear laughter, the distant sound of flutes, the creak of wheels on stone. The day's business is done, but the city is still awake. You think of how this economy works, not through greed alone, but through rhythm, through trust, through routine. Every jar of oil, every coin, every thread of silk, all part of an invisible web holding millions of lives together. Byzantium's greatness wasn't only in its emperors or its armies. It was in its markets, in its ports, in its quiet transactions. It was in the patience of its merchants, the honesty of its scales, the endurance of its workers. It was in the faith that tomorrow someone would still come to buy. Night returns, soft and warm. The lamps of the market glow like stars fallen to earth. The scent of olive oil lingers in the air. Coins jingle faintly as merchants close their boxes, whispering small prayers of thanks. The empire breathes, steady and calm. A heartbeat made of gold, grain, and faith. And as the last shop shutter closes, you realize that the hum of trade, that quiet, endless rhythm is not so different from the sound of the sea. Eternal, gentle, necessary. The night deepens over Constantinople. From the sea walls to the domes, the city glows faintly, bathed in the soft shimmer of moonlight. The last candles burn low in the windows of quiet homes, and even the cats, the true citizens of Byzantium, have fallen asleep along the warm stones. You listen. The air is full of silence, a silence that carries centuries. Somewhere far away, you imagine a child falling asleep in a small apartment near the harbor. His mother hums an old hymn, one her grandmother sang before her. The same words have traveled through 1,000 years, unchanged, just like the sea wind that moves softly through the curtains. That is Byzantium. Not only its emperors or its gold mosaics or its endless wars, but this, the ordinary, unrecorded life that pulsed beneath the marble and the glory. People waking, working, praying, and sleeping, lighting candles, whispering to the saints, arguing about bread or rent or rain, always caught between heaven and hunger. The Byzantine world was full of contradictions. It was poor and magnificent, tired and eternal, both fragile and unyielding. In one street you might find a philosopher debating divine light. In another, a baker kneading dough before dawn. Both were part of the same story, the same heartbeat. They built churches that touched the clouds, and yet they feared the next tax collector. They believed themselves the last true Romans, even as the walls around them cracked. They loved beauty, they feared change, and through it all, they endured. Perhaps that's why Byzantium still haunts us, because it feels human, not perfect, not heroic, but beautifully worn down by time. When the empire finally fell in 1453, the city did not die in fire. It died in silence. The bells stopped ringing. The last chants faded inside the Hagia Sophia, swallowed by echoes. But even then, something lingered. The scent of incense, the shimmer of mosaics catching a final ray of light. The Ottomans entered a city already half asleep. And yet, even under new rulers, the soul of Byzantium did not vanish. It remained in every curve of stone, in every archway, in every whispered prayer in Greek beneath the sound of the muezzin. A ghost civilization still breathing under new skies. Tonight, as you sit here listening, the past feels close. You can almost hear the monks chanting, smell the olive oil lamps, feel the cool marble beneath bare feet. For 2 hours, you have walked through a vanished world, through its crowded apartments, its dusty markets, its glowing churches. And yet, somehow, it all feels familiar, because even across 1,000 years, the human story doesn't change. We all live between light and shadow, between noise and silence, between what we build and what time takes away. So you breathe, you let the sounds fade, the bells, the chants, the city. Only the sea remains calm and eternal. And in that quiet, Byzantium lives on, not in its emperors, not in its wars, but in its silence. A civilization that whispered rather than shouted, that built beauty not to conquer, but to endure. And perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you too can feel it, the faint echo of their world, the shimmer of their faith, the gentle rhythm of their days. The night closes in, the candle burns low, and the empire, once again, dreams beneath the waves. Pause 10 seconds, faint wind and sea sound fade out. Good night, and may history sleep softly with you.